So this session is a panel. It's called Adopting Flutter at Scale, Challenges, Wins, and the Road Ahead at Universal. With me here are Lawrence and Michael. I'm going to ask them in a second to introduce themselves. My name is David DeRemer. I'm the CEO of Very Good Ventures. I had the great pleasure to get to know Lawrence and Michael over the last almost year or so, doing incredible work at Universal. I think really bleeding edge technology and opportunities. Oh, it's better if I talk closer. For Flutter. So I'm going to turn it over. We have to really eat the mic, I think is the thing. So Lawrence and Michael, can you please introduce yourselves, your roles at Universal, and how you've helped guide the Flutter transformation at Universal?
Absolutely. My name is Lawrence Wisne. I'm the Director of Mobile Engineering at Universal Destinations and Experiences. That is, a lot of people know it as theme parks. So my team runs the mobile app for the Universal Orlando Resort, the Universal Hollywood, Universal Studios Hollywood, and Universal Studios Japan. So a number of them are here today. That's all written in Flutter. So we're going to talk about how we got there and some of the strategies we've employed and how we've worked with VGV on these things. And we also have a number of other applications of our Flutter code base that we're going to talk about, and is part of scaling up the overall effort.
And I'm Mikal Wessel. I'm Lawrence's counterpart, but on the product management side. So I like to put it simply, is basically my job is to figure out the what and the why, and Lawrence helps us figure out the how. So it's a really good partnership, and Flutter has been phenomenal in transforming our business. So we're excited to share a little more about that today.
Great. So to get us started, I was hoping you guys could give us a little bit of sense of your ecosystem with Flutter. We've got a couple of things here up on the screen. I know there's even more than that. And I think this audience in particular might like to hear about the robustness of your experiences, all the different things that you've built in all the different ways. So maybe just give us a quick overview.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have what we call our flagship app. So flagship app is the app that powers Universal Orlando Resort, Universal Studios Hollywood, and Universal Studios Japan. That does all the things you would want to do in a theme park. So you can order food and drink using that. You can look at wait times. You can view the park map. You can plan your trip generally. There's a lot of information that we deliver through that app. And what we've also started to do alongside that is deliver experiences that use some of the other screens we have available at the parks and that our guests interact with. So what you're looking at here is actually a self-service kiosk that delivers our food and drink ordering experience, but obviously with a touch screen at the point of sale. So that is much more similar to something you would see at like McDonald's or these kind of fast food quick service restaurants. And so that's a really exciting development. One of the things that Flutter's empowered, something that we're moving to do more of. We also have what we call connected experiences. So we have interactives that interact with the park. So a lot of people are familiar with Super Nintendo World. Jake on my team is is representing. And we have Super Nintendo World and we have the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. And both of those have app experiences written in Flutter that are part of our apps that my team oversees. And they allow you to essentially sync hardware that interacts with the park. In Super Nintendo World, you get wristbands that interact with blocks and a lot of other the experiences around there, and gives you a very Nintendo-like tactile experience. And then on the Harry Potter side, you can buy a wand and sync the wand with your device, and then it actually allows you to have a questing experience, something if anybody's played Hogwarts Legacy. I like to say that it's somewhat similar to Hogwarts Legacy in real life, which is pretty cool. And so, yeah.
I was just going to add one thing. How many people here have been to Universal theme parks? Okay, so we got a lot of people here who have been there. Yeah, so you wouldn't believe it, but basically everything in our parks runs on technology, right? And think about all the surfaces you interact with every single day. I think as we have been transforming our digital and technology landscape across our theme parks, the use cases are pretty similar across the globe. So Flutter's been really powerful in like saying, okay, all these different screens and interfaces, everything like that. This is moving to Flutter, where we have one shared code base that serves our users domestically in the US, but also overseas in Japan. And so it's been a really powerful kind of ecosystem change for us to go from disparate systems, all different technologies, to shifting to things like Flutter that allow us to build these use cases faster and bring them to market faster.
And I was fortunate enough to take my kids to Universal back in March for spring break. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting that you don't see too often in Flutter experiences is you have the main experience, which is like what you would expect, browsing, getting content, park maps and things. But then you would have these little games, like you're saying, the Harry Potter experience, and very different design language. Is like an app within an app. And I think having the flexibility to kind of launch all those different experiences within the app was really cool to see. I think most of us, we build an app, and that app has a design, but you guys have many apps within this overall ecosystem you've developed. So take us a step back. I think a lot of people, you guys are at the forefront. You guys are, got a lot of Flutter going, a lot of interesting use cases. A lot of people still are just getting started with that journey. And at a large company like Universal, what leads to this? Like, how do you get to a point where you are even talking about doing Flutter? And then how do you convince leadership and your technology team and your product team and everybody to actually go forward with this to get to this point where you are now?
Yeah, I'll start, and I'll hand it to Lawrence to kind of finish off. But yeah, as you think about where we started, we really started with an iOS and Android app, like way back in 2015, maybe even earlier. And that was kind of sticking our toe in the water to say, does this work for us? Do our guests expect this when they come to the park? And what we've seen over the last 10 years is everybody wants to use an app to make their vacation better. And especially during COVID, everybody shifted to using the app. So basically, every single, what we call our travel party within everybody who comes to the park, so with their family, one person in their party is using an app. And so we've seen our user base scale to phenomenal numbers, hundreds of millions of users over a whole entire year, basically across Orlando, Hollywood, and Japan. And so a couple years ago, after having a legacy iOS and Android app for, let's say, 7 years, we said, okay, we're starting to hit some really hard changes that we want to make to our app on the infrastructure, on the navigation of the app, things that are structurally different than how it's done today. And not only do we have to do it once in an iOS app, we have to do it also in an Android app. And we basically had a pivot or persevere conversation of, do we continue to invest in duplicating efforts across both platforms, or do we decide to be different and take a risk and go with a hybrid platform? And we kind of had that moment to realize if it's going to cost so much to refactor, we should take this moment to reevaluate where we're investing our dollars and how we're building our apps to scale. And so that was when we basically started looking at React Native, Flutter, obviously, and many other platforms. And throughout that evaluation, we basically said we want to take a risk. Flutter's starting to take off. We think this is where cross and hybrid platforms are going to go in the future. We want to invest in this, and we want to be at the forefront of this. So we made a very bold choice to do it, and it's ultimately paid off really, really well for us.
Something, a different dimension to look at that I get asked a lot is how do you get there, right? So we've built our entire app on Flutter. We're all in on Flutter. My team writes Dart day to day, which is awesome. How did we get there, and how do other companies get there? And so one thing that I have noticed being on the other side of that journey is that maybe is a little would I say it is obvious, but I don't think it's like so obvious from a business perspective, is you go through this transformation where you have an iOS and Android team. And then what we actually did is we went and we rewrote the app in parallel alongside keeping our, like what we call the legacy app live. And then once the rewrite got done, it was just it was a feature for feature rewrite. And then we launched that, we hot swapped, if you will. And then now we are on Flutter, right? And once we did that, once we made that change, we effectively doubled the size of the engineering team, right? So we took everybody who was writing, either Swift or Kotlin, and we said, we're gonna reskill everyone on Flutter. We're gonna teach them Dart and this new platform, and we took that same number of engineers that was working in parallel, to build iOS and Android, and said everybody's writing Flutter now, and that's really powerful in terms of velocity. And if you're trying to tell a story as like what's the benefit of doing any of this, it's something that we know there's sort of this like theoretical benefit, but like really you get out the other end, now you have your Flutter app, and now you have twice the size of an engineering team with the same cost.
So you touched on something there that I think is really important, that a lot of people who are working in a large enterprise, you've got an existing app, you kind of have two major ways forward with this. One is the greenfield approach. We're going to build a brand new thing. We're going to start from scratch. The other is the more brownfield add-to-app experience. I think people have to, I know Sam at Betterment has said this sort of strangler fig pattern, if you know that, which is you kind of build a new app within and around the old app until you kind of choke out the old app and it's only the new app remains. Given that you guys were able to get this greenfield approach, which I think a lot of companies struggle with, like when people come and they say, hey, we want to do this, like, oh, we can't stop shipping features. There's a lot of benefits to both. How would you compare those two options? And if you, given your greenfield approach, what would you say to somebody who's experimenting with a brownfield sort of iteratively do add to app, what would you recommend for them?
I would say the intermediate state is reasonably costly, and you can get stuck there, right? So that's probably the biggest risk. If you're looking at a risk and benefit analysis between greenfield, brownfield, keeping in mind that it usually takes longer than you think. And so you start swapping out features, and now you got half your code base in Flutter Dart and half your code base in native, and that's a reasonably tough state to be in. It's like sort of the opposite of what I just described. It's like you have to have people who are good in Flutter, and you have to have people who are good in all the native stuff too. And so I would say making sure you fully evaluate those risks and make those super clear to the management team. So I could say, I would say to the management team, we can do a greenfield approach, rewrite fully in Flutter, double the size of the engineering team on the other side, or we can do this brownfield approach and replace feature by feature. And if something comes up and it isn't prioritized the way it needs to be, we are now in a weird state where we actually have, 60% of the capacity that we had when we started, because we have, Flutter over here, and, you have a mishmash of things. And so, there definitely is risk in that. And so, I would, obviously we went one particular way, and, I think what we typically get asked is how do we replicate that approach? And so that would be the argument, I think, for the greenfield approach. Obviously, you can do it the other way. You just have to be fully dedicated to it and not stop halfway through and create a much worse state than you started with.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add from like our business perspective is our organization had to commit to this, right? We basically said, we're going to stop developing things in iOS and Android for close to a year. We thought it was that important that we said, hey, new features, there's a lot of great stuff that's going on to empower our business right now. But we basically know that the app is doing a pretty good job fulfilling most of our use cases. So sure, we could continue to invest and keep on building alongside while we're doing this rewrite, or we could take a step back and fully commit, dive in all the way and say, we're going to commit to the rewrite. We're going to understand that this is basically going to set back new feature development for 6 to 8 months, maybe even longer. And then we're essentially going to come out the other end to be able to, as Lawrence said, effectively have double the engineering team be able to move faster. That was the big bet and risk that we took. And I can tell you guys, as a use case for us, it absolutely paid off.
So now that you guys are out the other side of that, obviously you have a lot of success. You were able to convince management to go forward with that. You were able to implement it. Now that you have hindsight behind you, and ultimately our goal when we do this is a developer conference, we talk about technology, all the cool things we do, but let's be honest, our objective is to create business value by creating a user experience that allows users to interact with our tools to create that business value. Now that you've gotten out the other end, what impact has this really had on your ability to create those user experiences that create value for Universal?
Yeah, I think one dynamic that's changed quite a bit as you think about the product management team and product owners as they play a role on the Scrum team. We used to have to manage, hey, do we write one story that we try to share between iOS and Android, and then we test at the same time? And you have to try to keep them in parity, and it's really, really hard to manage. You spend a lot of time just trying to keep things in sync across the platforms. So now what's really great is we can write one story, it's written in Dart, and ultimately we can have one consistent feature across both platforms. So you can imagine, just from the overhead of managing large scale projects, this helps us enable that, we have not only faster delivery, but it's more quality at the end. And so I think from a business perspective, we're seeing those returns as you mentioned, but also, things that we would basically have to take all that overhead in developing in two directions and the cost of having to do that to say, hey, do we invest all this in building these new features, or do we focus on all the small stuff, the fun stuff, the what we like to call surprise and delight features for our guests that come to our theme park? We never had the luxury of doing those, right? Because there's so many different business pressures that are coming in to say, well, we've got to work on the next theme park, the next connected experience with Super Nintendo World or Wizarding World of Harry Potter. There is no time to do fun, small things like animations and nice little graphics and things like that. You just focus on getting the next big feature out. Now that we're able to, basically parallelize the team, we can say, not only are we focusing on the big things, but we're also doing the small things that really make a difference.
I would say one other thing that has really changed, and I think is going to be our focus over the next year or two, is there are hundreds, maybe thousands of screens in a theme park, right? So we actually have this luxury of having a large physical manifestation of everything we're doing. And we are now evaluating all the different places we can possibly reuse our code on different screens. Like, so we're taking the multi-platform past iOS, Android, but also, okay, is there a kiosk over here that actually runs code similarly to this thing we built for the mobile devices? And oh, actually, we could just share the code base. And we've actually found a number of different cases where you can do that. Again, so you're combining code bases into one, being able to deploy to both iOS and Android, but then also taking parts of that code base, if you build things right and have it be nice and composable and being able to pull out pieces here and there, and then deploy variations of the things you built for your mobile apps on other platforms. That would be a little specific to us, but I do get the sense that a lot of companies would have some similar situation that they'd be able to take advantage of that will really come to light once you're like fully on Flutter.
Yeah, I think what you guys are doing on the multi-platform side of things relative to Flutter is really, really interesting, and I think we need to talk a lot more about this, because when we compare Flutter to React Native, we're really talking about it in a cross-platform perspective. Like, I can build an app, a mobile app, and I can run it on multiple devices. But when we start talking about building a kiosk, and a lot of that code is reused, maybe all, it's shared code bases, starting to build other types of displays, other types of interactive, maybe future Harry Potter ones have a screen on it or something. You never know. Tell us a little bit about, from a technical perspective, how the ability to take your mobile applications, right, and this thing, and when you think about, okay, we're going to get this onto a kiosk, we're going to get this onto other parts, how has that changed your approach to product and design and engineering when you're no longer targeting a single form factor?
Yeah, I think from a product perspective, it's interesting because it opens so many other doors to say, like, as you can see on the screen, look at the experiences across the kiosks that we have there. That's, as Lawrence mentioned, the same code base that we have running on the mobile app, but just with a different, front end interface, but it's adapted to basically the screen layout that it's given. And so I think, these things enable us to, we would have never even thought about building something like this with iOS and Android, right? Because our hardware in the park typically are like Windows-based machines. So it was never an opportunity for us to think about, how do we bring something like this to life? So as we're prioritizing things, we're talking to our business partners, it's never, hey, we want to invest double to not only build a pre-ordering capability within the mobile app that we give to our guests, but we also want to build a kiosk. Like, our business partners would be like, that's a lot of money. Maybe we'll do one of those things and we'll worry about the next one next year. But now that we're able to do this, we can say, hey, for relatively low cost, we can adapt to the new screen layout and we can deploy this in a Windows environment. We've never been able to do that before. So we're actually bringing new features to life that our business partners have been asking for years that we were never able to do. So it's really cool to see this. And something else I want to touch on is we have a design system in place. And one thing that's great, and you can see it across these two screens, everything kind of fits into that design system. They look, the feel, everything is similar. And that's because we have a design system that scales across the platforms. And so having Flutter, thinking about it this way, it helps us create brand consistency and these familiar experiences where they're like, oh yeah, I did it on the app. It's the same thing on the kiosk. Like, it's very familiar to the user, and they're more successful doing whatever the action is, like ordering food at a kiosk.
And from an engineering perspective, we've done things more responsibly, I believe, because of the multi-platform nature of a number of these things. The example I'm thinking of is our Super Nintendo World Companion app. So we have an app that goes along with the guests when you're in Super Nintendo World and allows you to like interact with the world and essentially get coins and stars and various rewards. And there is an in-park kiosk that shows a variation of the app. It's very similar, but it's not quite as personalized because it's not on your own device. It'll give you a leaderboard and some basic information about the land. And so we were able to, through good engineering, shout out to my team, take out certain pieces of the mobile app and just plug them into this in-park kiosk that runs on Windows. And that was due to the fact that we were thinking the whole time about the composability and being able to pull out different pieces of the app and rearrange them for some other form factor. And that's something you sometimes don't do, especially when you're trying to maintain two different versions of the same app and you're under all this pressure to ship things and keep the two apps at parity. You sometimes don't think about necessarily as much about all the high level engineering principles that you need to do if you were to like take this and rip this out entirely and go put it on an iPad turned sideways.
Can you talk a little bit about how you structure this as a sort of engineering team? Is this one massive mono repo code base that all this stuff lives in? Do you have Like, are you exporting these things as packages that you're using across multiple applications? One thing I think we talk a lot about is single code base, but I don't think that Flutter always and Dart applications always need to be single code base, all these apps, right? It could be shared code across multiple code bases, all with similar architectures, Dart, running multiple apps across different touch points. It's really that sharing ecosystem that could be interesting. How have you guys tackled that in terms of making it maintainable and easy and shareable across all these different platforms?
That's something we're actively working on. It's actually a work in progress. It is not one giant app. We actually have for our park apps, which we call our flagship apps, the Orlando, Hollywood, and Japan apps. Those are one code base. We build them 3 different ways. And so there's a different set of functionality for each park. But then like this kiosk, that's actually a separate code base that reuses part of our food and drink ordering business logic that we use in the mobile app. And so what we're looking to do is essentially establish internal package repository that allows us to have, we can do a pub within Universal ecosystem and get all the packages we need and all the different libraries and we need to run various various flavors of the things we build. And so we also have a internal app that we're building as well. And that's some of these new use cases are driving us to, again, be more composable with the way we build things and have it, we're actually looking at, and if there's anybody here who has a great one of the side quests for my team here is to find a good internal package repository for Flutter packages. So something that we can use to coordinate all of these different apps that we're deploying, because it can't just be one code base. We're trying to keep it consistent, but also have it be flexible.
Yeah, I think that's one of these things where as you're pushing the boundaries of what this can do and you're kind of stretching to the frontier of what's possible with Flutter, what the tooling supports, you guys are encountering new things that you need. And that's from an engineering perspective. I'm also curious, Michael, for you, as over time, you've first adopted Flutter, you're kind of doing this from an app perspective, multi-platform, you're getting all these kiosks. Can you tell us a little bit about how product design and engineering all work together at Universal and how this new sort of paradigm has changed the relationship between all those teams?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we typically we operate completely in like an agile Scrum fashion with some long-range planning included within that. And so we try to build our teams to be essentially fully capable to handle product, design, engineering, quality assurance, like basically everything they need within a box so they can ultimately deliver on some great features. I think prior to making this switch, it was harder because we spent a lot more time talking about engineering things and we didn't have time to really talk about design. And the engineers and the designers, they didn't have a lot of time to spend with each other because they were so focused on, I'm engineering, I'm design. There's very siloed things. We hand them off to each other. We have long feedback loops to iterate. It was very painful to really get things moving and operate quickly. And so now that we're kind of able to iterate faster, I think it's opening up the doors where we're essentially just shortening feedback loops. We no longer have to like keep design in another meeting so we don't have time in the engineering meeting to cover what we need to cover. We can all just meet together, plan together, work together, and shorten those feedback loops, which enables us to bring new features to market faster.
Great. So we talk about speed, acceleration. These are all things that we know Flutter does. A lot of flexibility, great developer experience, team experience benefits. Let's talk about the business for a second. Like we started before, Universal is a business. The objective is to get people to come to the park and buy food and do all these things. Can you talk a little bit about how this has actually impacted the business overall when you look back and where this is going, both in terms of maybe real impacts, but also perceived impacts from business leadership and your ability to kind of fund new interesting projects?
Yeah, absolutely. I think back to where we were pre-COVID and even before the Flutter transition, like not a lot of people in the parks were using the app. They basically just said, oh yeah, it's a map and I can see wait times. Like that's all I care about. We had 30 other features kind of sandwiched in there somewhere. No one cared about anything else, but I want to see a map. I want to see wait times. So I think what's happened over time is we've added more valuable features and especially are really accelerating that scale. People and our guests are finding more benefit to using the app, not only within the park, but actually outside the park as well. So they've kind of shifted in the customer journey stages to say, I'm actually planning my trip using the mobile app instead of going to the website because it's interactive, because it feels like a mobile app that's one of the top tier apps out there. I can plan my trip before I even come, so I have an even better trip once I get here. So I think that's a lot of what we've seen is the behavior change. And when you have more and more guests or users using your app, the business actually invests more to say, hey, by our guests using the app prior to coming here, they're better informed, they know what they want to do, they tend to spend more money. So we can kind of look at all of that data coming together to say, technology has opened this up. Rather than everybody, coming to theme park, for example, going to the front gate, everybody buying tickets, most people are doing that all at home. They're buying tickets at home, they're buying their hotel stays, they're basically linking their whole entire family with their face and facial recognition to their tickets. So that way when they walk in, they don't even need to bring out a paper ticket, they don't even bring out their phone, they just walk into the park. And all that basically makes our operations teams more efficient. So I think our business partners look at that and we see the efficiencies, we see the revenue impact, and ultimately we want to invest more in this because we're seeing the impact on our bottom line.
And let's talk about the kiosk. You mentioned before that that's something that maybe would have been difficult to do, right? It's a totally different platform, Windows machine. That might be something you maybe don't do. So what is the impact of being able to get something to market faster? I mean, we all know obviously the benefit, but you just opened a new park. So does this help you to actually generate revenue in a significant way that otherwise you wouldn't have because you were able to get that out faster?
Yeah, I'll cover from the business side, and I'm curious on your perspective too, but something that we've seen in our mobile app and also on the kiosk is there's a psychological effect of when you have images in your hand, rather than walking up to a point of sale and being like, what do I want? And all your kids are like, hey, I'm hungry, I just want to eat. Like, you tend to spend more money when you pre-plan and you have time, you're able to see those images up front. And so I think what we've seen even with the mobile app for many years now is people are actually using it to buy more food or to make additional orders because it's so seamless. They don't have to walk back up to the counter, wait in line. They can just do it all from their device. And with the kiosks, we're seeing something very similar. The behavior is the same, even though they're walking up to where a person was operating a point of sale before. Now they're just walking up and self-service doing it. They're actually spending more money, which is really interesting because most likely the pictures are right in their face. Their kids can reach up and choose the items that they want. It's very different than like having to interact with somebody, try to explain what you want, point at the pictures above the screen. And so I think that's what our operational partners are really seeing is saying, not only can we use our team that actually staffs the restaurant to go do more important things like deliver food faster, help guests, with getting their plates off their table or bringing them napkins. They essentially can change the way that their workforce operates these restaurants to make it a better experience for our guests because they have more time. And at the end of the day, we're also making more money from having these experiences that our guests can use.
Cool. Thanks. Why I wanted to call attention to that was I think if you don't do these things because of the barriers for the business, because of the time and the technical obstacles, you're leaving real money on the table, and I think this acceleration, the ability to do things quickly, we all know that speed matters, but also the ability to unlock an entirely new platform and new experience that otherwise might have been next year's roadmap is something that I think we need to be talking a little bit more as a Flutter community. This isn't just a nice to have thing. This is a legitimate impact on the business, but not only that, solving a user experience need that otherwise goes unmet. And I think one of the cool things about Flutter, and that you guys are doing a really great job of, is really not just always solving for the mean. Like when you have limited budget, limited time, you have to solve the highest impact, highest value thing. You were saying with the flourishes, the fun things. This is not a flourish. It's not an animation, but this is a thing that maybe otherwise you wouldn't have been able to do. And so I think that's really important. Let's talk about Epic Universe if we can. Brand new park, right? Super cool. I was joking with you guys earlier. It's like we're all here. Like we get excited when we launch an app. Imagine launching a theme park. I mean, wow. Massive undertaking, just incredible feat of human ingenuity and engineering and all kinds of design and everything else. Technology plays a big role in this park. How do you think the fact that you had already adopted Flutter, set up a lot of this infrastructure, set up the ability to implement this, what impact did this really have on opening that new park experience?
There were a number of different dimensions and features that we were able to implement that I don't think we would have been able to implement before. We actually went at a great velocity. We built a number of sort of bonus things. Like this was a bonus project, the kiosk here, and that was something that was a nice to have. And there was a product that was out of the box that we could have implemented that would have maybe done the job, but it would have been much less themed, and we would have had to sort of hide it away in the corner, this kind of thing, because there's a need for certain theming within a theme park. And so this enabled us to bring that to the forefront. On top of that, all of the food and drink ordering generally in the park goes through Flutter, goes through our apps. So every single time somebody orders food in the park, and doing that so it's seamless, so people enjoy it and don't spend too much time on it, and can get back to riding rides and going seeing shows and generally enjoying the experience of the park. Even though I will say the food is fabulous, so that is part of the experience. But there's plenty of other things to do, and people generally want to get the food and then get out and go do some of those things. So really being able to be very efficient with that. The process that Michael mentioned before, where our entry is now becoming more and more automated, where you essentially, we have a whole, we call photo validation, which you take a photo in the app and you attach it to your ticket, and then you can just walk through the gate and everything just works, right? So that removes like I'm gonna go stand for 25 minutes in the front gate line before I even get to set foot in the park, and your kids are all excited and you're trying to wrangle them, and so there's a lot of like little things that it makes better for each of our guests that we're really excited to have implemented. I mentioned before the Super Nintendo World and Harry Potter integrations. Those really bring those parts of the park to life, and they enable people to interact in ways that are just not possible in most theme parks, which is really cool. So there's a lot of, and the really cool thing about Flutter, and you mentioned this before, is like each of these things is almost like a different app. And the team has really been able to work on a bunch of different dimensions that are very different things because of the some of the architecture principles that are used in Flutter, and us sticking to them. We've been able to build multiple things that are completely different on the same code base and deploy them all at once, which we did. We ended up deploying I think something like 10 features within a month or two, that were being introduced again on a theme park that's getting sort of global recognition. So it's not like we get to soft launch it and it's a secret. So it was a really, really cool process. Flutter enabled it for sure. So having, again, essentially double the engineering team on my end, we don't have to build everything twice, so we get to ship twice the features, which is something that's powerful.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add is when we announced Epic Universe, our chairman came out and he said, this park will be the most technologically advanced theme park in the world. Like, that was his challenge, not only internally to us, because when he announced that, I remember us all looking at each other being like, we got some work to do. The next 5 years are going to be a little busy for us. But as you think about like the change that and the impact that technology has on it, especially around like mobile food and drink ordering, these self-serve kiosks, they have to infrastructure plan everything at the park, right? So they have to think about, in my restaurant, how many point of sales am I going to need? And by adding point of sales, how many tables do I then need to reduce to have these additional point of sales? By having things like this, we came out right of the gate because of the trust that our partners in the food and beverage operations had with us. They said, we don't want point of sales at all. Like, we don't want anybody to have to go to a point of sale. They can use the app just like they're using very successfully at our other parks. We'll have these kiosks if they want to use a kiosk instead, and ultimately it will all be self-service. And that enables their teams to ultimately be more efficient in what they're doing, save us a lot of money in terms of operating those venues, but also, people are just having a better experience. And it's really interesting that people that use these actually, our mobile app and our kiosks, they tend to think they get better service from our team members, which is generally true, but it's also they're just not interacting with people and they're able to just sit down, relax, and be able to hang out. And I think people really, really enjoy the freedom of being able to do that.
So one question I have about the Epic Universe launch, given this technology, one of the things about having a reduced sort of exposure set to risk, do you think that Flutter actually made, I'm sure it was very stressful, I'm sure there was a lot of things going on, but as the alternative of like even just having to do 2 apps and Windows or things like that, do you think that this significantly improved the confidence and reduced the stress and risk for your teams to deliver?
Yeah, I'll touch just on back before we had a Flutter app. I remember we had so many difficult conversations with our stakeholders who were like, no, this guest is having an issue. And we have to figure out, well, are they using iOS? Are they using Android? Like, is it like a flip phone? Like, without the details, it's really hard for an engineering team to figure out what's going on. And I think that's something I've really noticed is like, now our partners just expect us to be able to fix it without having to go back and forth with them having to ask the guests, well, what operating system are you on? They don't know. Like, they have no idea what any of that means. So asking for that detail isn't possible in our world. So I think that's something interesting that Flutter's enabled for us is now the troubleshooting is so much easier. It's like, well, if it's happening, it's likely across both. We can find the issue a lot faster. We can fix the issue a lot faster. And ultimately, our partners will be more successful operating with our guests in the field because they know how to communicate with us. We don't have to spend hours working with them to get the details.
I'll also say from engineering perspective, this is another good argument in favor of sort of the rewrite greenfield approach, right? So we had just rewritten our app in Flutter year before we launched Epic, and that really cleaned up a lot of things and really enforced certain more modern principles. Obviously, everybody has to deal with legacy code in their apps, and that can be the source of a lot of instability. So it was a really nice luxury. When we moved to Flutter, alongside that, we got an app that was much more stable, almost never crashes. That's actually something that is a first thing we noticed with Flutter. I'll actually hit on that real quick, is our app almost never crashes. And it used to crash more than we would have liked. And crashing, for us, and I think for anybody who's a mobile developer, means from a guest standpoint, they're like, I'm doing something and then the app closes and I open back up and now it's broken, and so that's what we'd hear in the field. And that's just like the worst kind of thing to debug. So we really start to remove these, like what happened, moments from the guest journey, and it's a very powerful thing.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I want to close with asking you guys, and then I want to see if anybody else has a question in the audience. If anybody has a question, raise their hand. I'll bring a microphone to you. While we're doing that, what's something that's exciting for you guys? When you think about the next frontier of where you're going, I think you guys are already kind of out in the lead with a lot of things going on with Flutter. What are some things coming down the line? You don't have to get into specific features or things like that, but when you think about Flutter and the opportunities it creates for you, what are the things that get you excited that you feel like you can do now that you couldn't do before?
So should I just say AI? Should we start with that? I think that's something that is, I think it's really interesting. The consumer expectations are changing, right? The end user expectations are changing because the behavior is changing across all these apps. We're starting to unlock things they've never been able to do before. And when you think about a theme park, actually contrary to a lot of, I would say, mobile app KPIs, if you're a mobile app company, your app is the majority source of your revenue, you're always focused on how do we get more sessions? How do we get them in the app more often? Engagement is super important, right? But what's interesting and contrary for us is when people are in our theme parks, we don't want them on their phones. We want them to enjoy what they paid premium dollars to experience and do it seamlessly. That's the goal. And so we basically have to do, as I mentioned, that customer lifecycle change of we want them to do everything pre-trip, and then when they get here, everything's super simple for them to do really quick, so they can just enjoy the time with their family and have a great experience. And so, I jokingly said AI, but I think that's a really exciting opportunity for us. Is I can tell you, prior to switching to Flutter and seeing the accelerated delivery, we'd be like, oh yeah, AI is like 2035 for us, maybe, like if we can do it, because we got so many other priorities ahead of us. But now it's like, we actually can lead with some of these, let's say, agentic or AI experiences for our customers, that we can do things like, hey, we know you love churros, we know you love Harry Potter, we know you love Simpsons. Right now, we know, you don't know, but we know where the people in the park are. So we know Simpsons is a place to go right now. We can recommend that to you, so that way you can ride more rides during the day and maximize your time in your parks. Like, we have all that data that we can now bring to the forefront to the end user so they can have a better experience within our parks. So that, to me, I think is a super exciting thing. And it's so unique, being in a world where you can literally walk out into the park and see tens of thousands of people using the products that you build every single day. And so it's going to be really awesome how we kind of change the whole experience that guests are having within our parks by leveraging things like AI within our mobile apps.
I laughed when David asked that question because we are not allowed to talk about things, all the cool stuff we're building. There's a lot of it, and Michael is in product, so he's much better at navigating around that kind of thing. So I'll leave it at that.
Hey, question about your technical skills, right? Like for developers that are doing Android and iOS for let's say 10 plus years. Now, when they come to Flutter, they are noobs, almost, and they make so many mistakes, right? So how do you transform them and also kind of alleviate the concern that they will be, replaced, or like they're not as specialized now.
So we did have to do this with the team. So essentially, there was a day where we launched the new version of the app, and everybody is now in Flutter. And that was there's obviously some coaching you have to do. And one thing that I will say is, one thing that is underrated about Flutter, that shout out to the Google team that's here and everybody who is on the Flutter team, because the materials on Flutter are really fantastic for introducing people to the new tech. So in my case, it's like we have our whole, we have iOS developers and Android developers, and there's tons of good material for them to, to start that journey of learning Flutter, which was really great. And then we also put together a more formal training regimen, if you will. We have some people, we actually brought in some people who knew Flutter, and that was their primary skill set. And they helped create and answer specific questions about, okay, so I know how to do this thing in Kotlin. Like, how does that translate to Dart? We tried to line up the expertise to be able to answer that question very specifically. And same deal with Swift, or there were a little bit of Objective-C in our code base still, and so but most people were writing Swift, and so making sure that we could translate. Okay, I think about the world this way when I'm in developing for iOS. How does that translate? And then there's a second piece of getting people excited about the change. Like, why is this good? Why is this good for my skill set? How is this going to, and I think everybody on the development team wants to have skills that are marketable, right? So there's also hey, Flutter is the way to make something that is multi-platform. It's the way of the future. There's a lot of stats. I forget, some very large number of new apps are spun up on Flutter. I want to say it's like 30. Do you know the number? You should know. 28. I was going to say 30%, so I'm close. Okay, good. So 30% of all new apps are spun up on Flutter. Like, you want to know how to do this. This is actually really fantastic, and also you'll be able to get more more touch points around the park. Like, when you start thinking about, like, it expands what you're thinking about. You're not just thinking about, like, my Android development. You're thinking about, hey, I'm building a piece of code that could actually get deployed to any one of those hundreds and hundreds of screens that are within our purview.
Hello. Hey. Awesome. Thanks, guys, for the discussion. Really enjoyed it. I'm really impressed that you got Flutter running on the Windows machines in the park. When I've brought up discussions with that, I feel like I usually get the responses like, oh, we'll build a website and run that in kiosk mode or something like that. So what did that look like to use Flutter in that sense, as opposed to like a web technology that might be more common in your engineering department? I'm unsure about that, but and then two, mechanically, how are you deploying builds? Are these like native Windows builds? Are you compiling to Windows and then deploying to those machines, or some other mechanism? Thanks.
Yeah. So right now, like the kiosk here is, we actually have a image that goes to all of our points of sale, and we modified the image, and the image actually has, we run off of Oracle, something called Oracle Symphony. And so it used to be Oracle Symphony of a particular configuration would get deployed to all the points of sale in the park. SCCM, I want to make sure I have this. Yes, okay, good. Which is the Microsoft sort of deployment software for this kind of thing. And then, and so we added a Flutter app to that image. And now the new master image has Flutter app and the Oracle Symphony, and a thing that essentially allows you to switch between them. And my team is, shout out to my team and the team at VGV. They worked together on this, and it was, it's gone pretty flawlessly. Like, once we've tested a few machines, we say, okay, it's good. We can image this out to everything, and essentially each venue can turn it on as they will.
Maybe one, you also mentioned, how do you decide website versus, a Flutter app or something like that? I think what's interesting about the setup with our point of sale is they have an app launcher today. So to like launch point of sale on a Windows machine, you have to launch, I don't know if it's a Windows app or whatever it is, but essentially that's how you get into point of sale mode on the Windows machine. And so we basically, for our team, we said, hey, now we're just developing the launcher to have two options. You can either turn it into guest-facing mode, where we just put it in this kiosk mode, or you can launch the regular POS. And so for us, I think it was pretty natural to say, we're giving our operators, our team members within the park, just two options and a new launcher, which makes it easier than like launch a website, go to a URL, and so on. It's more native feeling, if you will.
Thanks, guys, for this conversation. This was really good. We learned a lot. I think one of the things that I heard out of this as a takeaway is Flutter is sort of this platform of abundance. You were mentioning how you end up with double the engineering team. And I think sometimes we think about this as, oh, I'm going to save. But really, you're creating more. And you're talking about these new flourishes you get to add, adding kiosks that maybe you wouldn't otherwise get time or budget or resources to do, or even exploring these AI features, which if you were maintaining two complicated code bases with a lot of legacy, maybe you don't get the time and space to do some of those new things. And so I think you guys are in a position where you are able to take advantage of these radical changes that are happening when you look at all the agentic AI things that are happening. If you are stuck in the mud with legacy code bases and you're just fighting those constantly and you cannot ship new features, how are you possibly going to survive in the world of agentic AI? So that's why personally, I think that Flutter plus AI is a match made in heaven, because my big drum I beat is AI shouldn't write code twice either. And so I think this was really great in terms of illustrating that abundance that you guys have created at Universal, and fundamentally be able to create a fantastic experience for your guests at Universal. So thank you very much for the conversation and for being here. Thanks, everybody.